Hey Internet, Gordon Ung with PC World here. I know you want to know how the new Snapdragon X performs in a shipping laptop. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, but we are at least one step closer thanks to a nice report from Signal65.com, who got to put their hands on a brand new Microsoft Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X Elite inside of it. I know you're going, I've never heard of Signal65.com. Who are they? Well, unlike a conventional review website like PCWorld.com, Signal65 are basically a bunch of analysts that work with hardware companies for money. So this is a sponsored report. Let's get that out of the way up front. Microsoft basically paid Signal65 to do an analysis on the new Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X on it, and we end up with a 29-page report looking at performance, battery life, and more importantly, you're going to want to stick around for this, how the laptop performs in Windows 11 in emulation or translation mode. So that's actually something of very much interest to me. We're going to see that here. But let's kick this off with what they compare that Surface laptop to, because that is very, very important. I'm going to pull that up. You can see on the far left, we have the new Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X Elite X1E-80-100. That is a 12-core Snapdragon chip. That is compared to the previous version of the Surface laptop, the Surface Laptop 5, which has a 12th gen Core i7-1255U. That is an older Intel chip. In fact, it looks like Microsoft basically skipped the 13th gen and 14th gen. They just didn't think it was worth it. That is also a U-class chip, so not exactly the fastest thing in the world. Also, they compare it to a Microsoft Surface Pro 9. That is a tablet. It's at a big disadvantage here because it is smaller. It is a tablet, which always is a disadvantage versus clamshell laptops. But what I like is that laptop, that device has a Microsoft SQ3 in there. That is a Qualcomm ARM-based chip that Microsoft has been pushing for a long time. So we get to see not only Surface laptop versus older Surface laptop, we get to see Qualcomm Snapdragon X versus Microsoft SQ3, or basically older Qualcomm 8CX part. And actual laptop CPUs you would care about, though, System 65 compares it to an MSI Prestige 16 AI Evo A1MG, and that, of course, has a Intel Core Ultra 7 155H. That is a Meteor Lake CPU, and if you don't remember, that is a 6 performance core, 8 efficiency core, 2 low power efficiency core, and 22 threads in that Meteor Lake CPU. The SQ3 I didn't mention is a 4 big cores, 4 little core design, and of course the last laptop that's on this list is the Apple MacBook Air 15. It has the newest Apple M3 chip in there that has 8 performance cores and 10 graphics cores. These are all classically what I would consider integrated graphics laptops, and I think it's the right way to do it because people go like, well, I want to see it against a laptop with discrete NVIDIA graphics, or I may want to see it against the Pro. Those are considerably more money. They might be a little heavier, although in the MacBook Pro 14, it's actually pretty light, but it does cost more, and then it gets really messy because now you're just juggling too many laptops. I think these are the kind of laptops the average person would be looking at that is not entirely chasing high-performance graphics. So let's look at some of the performance we're going to get out of the Signal 65 report. We're going to kick this off with thermal analysis. They basically take the clamshell laptops, they run Cinebench 2024 on them, and then they take a thermal image of the top of the lids. Yes, I know thermal imaging isn't the most accurate way to do it. You should attach a thermocouple to it, but this is actually good enough for government use here. And the winner is the MacBook Air M3, which gets up to about 114 degrees over the keyboard. So it's actually very cool. 114 degrees is not the coolest, but decently, it's definitely the winner in this contest. Surprisingly, though, the Surface Laptop 5 with that Alder Lake U in it is the next up. Now, that MacBook Air M3 got up to about 115 degrees. The Surface Laptop with that Alder Lake U gets up to 116.7 degrees. So it's basically about the same temperature as that M3. So that's quite a good showing for that Surface Laptop. And I will say that's probably because, again, it is not the fastest multi-core processor out there. So that's one reason that Surface Laptop 5 is doing so well. And of course, what you want to know is like, well, how does the new Surface Laptop do with the Snapdragon X? It's not bad, 123 degrees up near this hinge. And of course, on the keyboard, it's 50.3 C degrees. So not terribly hot. But of course, it's going to be warmer than the MacBook M3 as well as against the previous generation Surface laptop. The hottest laptop, though, here is the MSI Prestige 16 Evo, which gets up to a nice toasty 133 degrees right on the keyboard, too, right where your fingers are going to go. In fact, it's warm enough that you're actually seeing heat bloom come out of the fans on the side of the laptop because it's actually warming up the desk that it's sitting on. So the MSI Prestige 16 with the Meteor Lake is getting nice and toasty. Some of that, of course, is because it has the most cores here. It has 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores, and it's just pushing, a lot more cores, and it's just going to get warmer. And obviously against the Alder Lake, it's going to push more heat. And I do want to point out for people who think like, oh, this is how it's always going to be. Laptop makers have a big say in how they want to tune the acoustics, how they want to tune the thermals of their laptop. Some laptop makers may want to have a really, really cool keyboard, and they're willing to give up some performance on it. Some laptop makers may say, you know what, you bought our brand MSI because you want performance. We're going to crank that baby up because you will scream if you don't get all the performance. And that's what you may be seeing at play here. Let's go to the next test, though, and that is Cinebench 2024 using a single thread. Same order for these. The new Surface Laptop, MacBook M3, Surface Laptop 5, previous gem, and the Evo 16. The winner, again, is the MacBook Air M3 at about 95 degrees. This is important because Cinebench 2024 at a single thread basically simulates what you might see in using a browser or basically sitting there in office all day. You're not really pushing every single core in your laptop, so generally it's going to be a lot cooler. So this actually is probably more applicable to what people are going to do every day on their laptop. So obviously the MacBook is nice and cool at that 95 degrees. Again, that's below the skin temp of the average person. The Snapdragon X actually doing pretty decent here, about 99 degrees. So again, that's a little bit warmer than the average person, but you're not going to really be able to tell. So I would say sitting on the MacBook or the new Surface laptop with that Snapdragon X, it's just going to feel like it's not getting warm. Surprisingly, though, where you saw the Prestige 16 Evo previously get very, very toasty, it's not bad here at 111 degrees. Yeah, it'll feel a little bit warmer, but honestly, 111 degrees is not bad at all. The real surprise is that MSI Prestige 16 Evo, previously got really toasty, but now we're seeing it only push 106 degrees here. It's not bad. Again, I think most people wouldn't even complain about that when you're just doing browsing or using Office. And of course, the other head scratcher is why in the world was that Surface Laptop 5 with the 12th Gen Alder Lake in there so cool earlier, but now it's actually the warmest at 111 degrees. So it's a little confusing. Again, that could just come down to the tuning of the laptop maker as well, but the actual winner, MacBook Air 15, and a very close second place is that Surface Laptop. And honestly, not doing bad at all is that Prestige 16, and the worst is that 12th Gen Surface Laptop. But let's actually talk about the other thing that's associated with heat, because in a typical Windows laptop, when it gets warm, the fan speeds crank up. So people don't like the fan speeds, they don't like the heat. To get at that, Signal 65 basically looked at the sound and fan noise of this. You can see it represented. All of the laptops and the Surface tablet are actually represented in this chart. You basically want to stay as close to the center as possible to be the quietest. And the actual winner, I would say it's really a tie, is in black, is that MacBook at 24.9 dB. And, the next up is actually the Surface Pro 9 because, hey, by the way, these are both fanless designs. I sort of expect that that quietness, and it does probably get a little bit at the test conditions. It doesn't look to me like they did this in actually an anechoic chamber. So that's probably why you're seeing some variances here because both of these really should, frankly, be dead silent because they don't have fans in them at all. Next up, though, and again, this is under an all-core load, Cinebench 2024 again. Next up is the actual new Surface laptop with Snapdragon X Elite, because to me, that's the one that's actually very important because a lot of people expect this to be as dead silent as, basically sort of Apple laptops. That's one real advantage to Apple laptops with, Apple Silicon have had over Windows laptops. But Snapdragon X Elite, when you're pushing all those cores, it looks like that fan is going to spin up. Again, this is Cinebench 2024 multi-threaded performance, so it's probably about one of the heavier loads you can run for a regular person. Not totally real in some ways because people are not pushing all those cores, but I'm a little surprised that it's pushing 32.2 dBA because I thought it would be much quieter. In fact, that's actually it's not that much better than the Surface Laptop 5 with that 12th gen 1255U in there. So this is 33.6 for that 12th gen Intel chip. 32.2 is, I would say, that's basically dead even between these laptops. So that's kind of a surprise. And again, MSI likes to swing for the fences, and you're looking at 39.5 dBA for the Prestige 16. So you will know those fans are there. And again, under a multi-core load, you're going to feel it in the heat. You're going to hear it in the noise. And again, I just want to say this. Some of that is because it just has more cores. And some of that is because the laptop makers, they go, you know what? You want your performance? We're going to give you fan noise with the performance because there's no other way we can do it without it. That's on the left side. That's the multi-threaded performance. On the right side, we have Cinebench 2024 using a single thread. Again, that sort of simulates what you would get if you were just doing browsing. Frankly, if you were doing most Photoshop work is also very lightly threaded. If you're doing Office, it just typically does not push all those cores. I would say these are all pretty much dead even. I would expect, again, the MacBook to be the equivalent of that Surface laptop since they're both fanless. So again, this probably speaks to a little bit about the fact that they're not using an anechoic chamber in here, so they really can't get that noise floor out of it. But let's face it, it's basically dead even between the MacBook, the new Surface laptop with Snapdragon X. It's a little bit louder, not that much louder for that Surface laptop with the Alder Lake in there. And of course, the Surface Pro 9, basically the same. So I would say all four of these are basically, you're probably not going to hear a difference. It's a little bit louder for the Surface laptop, but not a huge amount. 3 dBA is, yes, it is a sizable increase in sound, but I would say not that bad because this would be bad. This is actually the MSI Prestige 16 Evo with Meteor Lake in there. I'm kind of surprised that it actually gets as loud as it basically does when you're pushing an all-core load on there. Again, this may just simply come down to tuning that MSI has done to say, like, you know what? We want to give you the most performance. That means we're going to give you more fan noise, and that's what's going to cost. So who knows? We're going to find out when we get more actual laptops. But it looks like, in general, Snapdragon X is not going to be as quiet as I expected under an all-core load, especially if you're pushing something like Cinebench in there. But, it's decent. It's decent, not horrible. But, fanless, a true fanless experience is still going to come from basically the older Surface Pro 9 as well as that MacBook Air M3. Let's look at battery life, though, because that's actually very important. I haven't seen a lot of full rundown tests of the Qualcomm Snapdragon X part, and of course, I haven't seen it in a actual shipping laptop at all. The winner is that same bright orange color. Basically, the longer bar is better. We don't actually have the full rundown times that Signal 65 is telling us. They're basically scores normalized against it. So basically, this is 100%. And the MacBook is about, 84%. So obviously you're getting about 16% less runtime. Playing a video file, I'm going to highlight this so you see it. Playing a video file at 150 nits, and that's a H.264 video file played locally on the laptop, just looping and looping and looping until the battery dies, I imagine. So, this is a nice showing for the Surface laptop with that Snapdragon in there. The absolute worst, though, is the Surface Laptop 5 with the Alder Lake CPU in there. That's kind of a surprise to me, but I'm going to get into that later on. Next up is that Surface Pro 9. Again, I thought a Surface Pro 9 would do better, especially with an SQ3 in there. You'd think it would have better battery life, but you're seeing the new Surface Laptop 15 basically give you almost double the performance of it. And of course, looking at that MSI, the new Surface Laptop with Snapdragon X is giving you about 25% better battery life. So that's something to be said. Looks good for Snapdragon X there. So battery life expectations, just playing local video files should be good. But one thing that I didn't see included in the Signal 65 specs that I think should have been included is the thing that does matter, and that's the size of the batteries. So I actually dug up the battery capacity for the laptops here, and it tells you a little bit about it because the MacBook Air 15 has a 66 watt hour battery, 66.5 apparently. So that's a decent sized battery, typically what you're finding in most thin and light laptops. The Surface Laptop 5, though, interestingly, has a very, very small battery. I'm kind of shocked that the battery is this small because I would have expected 60, 65 watt hours, especially in a 15-inch screen laptop. But Microsoft decided to put a 46 watt hour battery in the Surface Laptop 5. I actually don't know the size of a battery in the new Surface Laptop with the Snapdragon X, but I imagine it is the same size battery, so probably also 46 watt hours. I don't know, which is like a big head scratcher to me because I want to know, because it does matter how big the battery is, because that's basically how large your gas tank is. And in fact, the Surface Pro 9 actually has a 47.8 watt hour battery. It's actually larger than the Surface Laptop 5, so it kind of tells you something, right? Like, I don't know how big the battery is in the Surface Laptop 5. It's probably the same size because it looks like it's simply the same outsides, the same insides, but with Snapdragon. But I'll have to wait till I see more specs. I didn't see it on the Microsoft website this morning, but we're going to find out later. But these laptops, both of them have considerably small batteries in them. So that does make a difference, especially when you're looking at 46 watt hours versus 66 watt hours. That is considerably bigger battery in that MacBook Air 15, because obviously it's a bigger laptop. But the last laptop I'm talking about is that MSI Prestige 16, because that baby has a 99.9 watt hour battery. That is basically the largest battery you can put in a laptop and still legally bring it onto a plane in the world. So that's a huge battery in this laptop. And of course, that is what is feeding Meteor Lake. I will say the other thing in the defense of the MSI Prestige 16, though, it also has the highest resolution screen here with that 3840 by 2400. That's basically more resolution than of a 4K panel, right? So as you increase the screen resolution, you generally pay for it in battery life. So between Meteor Lake, between all those cores, between the higher resolution panel, I could see 99.9 watt hours making a lot of sense. But this is, if you're looking at this and you're going, oh, I see this is awesome for Snapdragon, I would want to see Snapdragon X go up against another laptop with the same resolution panel, with, basically a similar size battery to make a comparison before I get there. But, I will say it is a good showing if this is a 46 watt hour battery for the Snapdragon X versus the MacBook Air with a 66 watt hour battery. So a considerably bigger battery in that MacBook Air, and the Snapdragon X would, if that is the same, it was a 46 watt hour battery, is still outperforming it. That's a good showing for the Surface Laptop and the Snapdragon X. So that's something that needs to be said. And I do want to mention the resolution, 2496 by 1664 for the Surface Laptop, and versus 2880 by 1864. So, somewhat similar, a little bit higher res for the MacBook, but honestly, kind of close. But again, the 4K plus panel on that Prestige, it hurts it, but they make up for it with that big ass battery. But even with that big ass battery, they're still running 25% less video runtime than that Snapdragon X Elite in the Surface Laptop, the new Surface Laptop. Let's look at something a little more practical, though, than video. And this is Signal 65's test run of Procyon productivity. So UL makes a test where you can basically run a looped version of Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Excel. It basically is a multitasking test where it goes through and very realistically will test the application to give you a score at the end. They actually have adopted this into a battery test. So it simulates what would happen if you were sitting at a cafe where you didn't have access to a plug and you were just doing, again, Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel over and over and over again until the battery dies. So very realistic, because I really don't think people are watching videos until their battery dies anymore. I believe this is at the same 150 nits again, but the winner is very nice. First up, though, this is only against the Windows laptops because this test does not run on the MacBook OS, the Mac OS, so there is no score for the MacBook Air 15. The winner is that new Surface laptop. So again, this is a pretty decent showing because you're basically getting the best battery life out of the Surface laptop with that Snapdragon X. However, you are only coming in about 10% battery life versus that Meteor Lake laptop in the Prestige 16. But again, everything I just previously said matters because when you're looking at, again, I assume this is a 46 watt hour battery. You're going up against a 100 watt hour battery. However, with a much, much higher resolution screen, it gets a little hard to compare these two. So the actual better comparison might be Surface laptop, new Surface laptop versus Surface Laptop 5. So Snapdragon X versus Alder Lake 12th Gen U, and you're looking at about 40% better battery life. And again, this is assuming that the new Surface laptop has basically a 46 watt hour battery, the same as the Surface Laptop 5, which I'm hoping it is, because if that's true and you're basically looking at just sitting there doing office all day, that means you should expect to see about 40% better battery life out of a laptop that's comparable, right? Because again, both of those laptops have the same resolution screen. I assume they have the same battery capacity. The only difference really is the actual SoC or chip inside of them, because they have the same amount of memory too, and the same SSD capacity. So this actually might give you a better indication of what to expect for battery life out of the Snapdragon X in actual shipping laptops. And again, it gets really messy because you have different laptops with different resolution screens, as well as different battery capacities. But this is probably about as close as we're getting 1-to-1 between Snapdragon X and Intel's 12th gen and frankly 13th gen and 14th gen U class chips, because it looks like Snapdragon X is handily beating them in battery life. So this is Geekbench. I'm actually not so interested in the Geekbench performance. We've actually seen this has already come out in a lot of the preview testing in the that they've given the press access to. The actual winner, though, you got to give it to the MacBook. Although Geekbench is not the end all, or it's great to yell about on Twitter with people, but people do overestimate its value sometimes. But 15% better for the MacBook over the Snapdragon, as well as over surprisingly over the Meteor Lake laptop. And when you're looking at multi-threaded, though, Meteor Lake is actually a little bit faster than the MacBook Air, although it's got considerably more cores in there. But the actual winner, when you're looking at all core, you got to give this to Snapdragon X, is the actual Snapdragon X, right? So, but again, I'm not totally sold on that. This is Cinebench performance. We've seen a lot of this stuff on the internet because it is all out there. Again, single thread performance, Apple Silicon doing pretty well in Cinebench 2024. I will say the previous version, Cinebench R23, wasn't exactly the same results here, but be there. That's what it is. But when you look at multi-threaded performance, you're actually looking at the Snapdragon X handily beat that MacBook Air. You're looking at 12 cores versus 10 cores. But again, the MacBook Air actually costs more than the Surface laptop, and that's really the metric that most people care about. They don't look at the actual core count, and it's actually somewhat faster than that Meteor Lake chip, 5%. Not a lot, but Meteor Lake is also handily beating the 8 cores in that Snapdragon as well. So you got it in the MacBook as well. So you got to look at that. Let's keep going. There is some modern AI performance. They're using Procyon AI Compute. Big win here for Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X. Basically, almost 50% better than the MacBook. It's 50% better than the Surface Pro 5G, and 70% faster than the Prestige 16 with the Meteor Lake in there. So again, we'll have to see. I believe this is run on the actual NPUs in here, and which does not even run on the 12th gen at all. So this is a bit of a shocker to see that SQ3 do so well against Meteor Lake, but this is only running the performance of the NPUs. And again, it's a win. It's a big win for Snapdragon X. Let's keep going. They did actually run DaVinci Resolve. By the way, DaVinci actually has a native ARM version. So that matters. So it does actually work, and Signal 65 saying, hey, it actually works. And I will say everything previously we've run, there are native ARM versions. Next up is Handbrake 1.73, where they basically do an encode of a 4K H.264 file to 4K H.264 using hardware encode. If you don't know what that means, that's basically using the hardware encoders built into the media engines of all of the laptops here. So that's going to be a little different for each laptop. This version apparently does support ARM and Snapdragon. So the big winner here is QuickSync. The QuickSync performance in Meteor Lake with Intel Arc. You're looking at 40% more performance than Snapdragon X and significantly more performance than the MacBook Air. But again, you're doing a video encode using the hardware encoders built into all of these laptops. The absolute worst performer is that older SQ3. You also have QuickSync in the Surface laptop in 12th gen. It is a slower part. Iris Xe is not as fast as Intel Arc. And the big winner, the nice thing again, is you got to give it to Meteor Lake, easily beating out Apple, easily beating out both Qualcomm parts, and also easily beating out that 12th gen part. So, but of course, for Microsoft and for Qualcomm, what they want to show you is that Snapdragon X is completing this media encode, basically 26% faster than the MacBook with the M3 inside of it, and about 15% faster in this other encode test. I guess it's a higher bit rate. What is the difference here? I'm not even sure what they're doing here. But anyway, it looks like it's a higher bit rate. This is basically modern web performance. Okay, so they fire up Google Chrome. By the way, this is also native ARM performance. And they're basically running Speedometer and Jetstream. By the way, those are actually developed by Apple's WebAssembly team. So a little bit of a home court advantage. Also, Google Chrome is native for ARM. And it is, of course, native for Apple Silicon as well. The winner is Apple Silicon, coming in about 40% faster in Speedometer 3, which is a fairly new version of it, as well as about 27% faster in Jetstream 2.2. It's also faster than Meteor Lake and the older SQ3, as well as 12th gen. There are definitely more browsing benchmarks you can run. People still like to run this, though. I think there's more I'd want to run. But, generally, the winner here is MacBook. But the moral victory for Qualcomm is that they are still outperforming Meteor Lake in Speedometer 3 and Jetstream 2.2. But again, there's definitely more browsing benchmarks you can run. And this is still somewhat of a home court advantage for Apple because WebAssembly is their thing. So let's look at productivity. This is basically, again, Procyon running Microsoft Office 365. Again, multitasking in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. There are two versions of the test. One runs on Apple OS. One does not run on Apple OS. So first one, let's actually compare to the Apple on top. So you're basically looking at, again, overall performance, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. I would say, PowerPoint interestingly has a bit of an edge for the Mac Silicon, but overall, I would say these results indicate it's dead even. And the reason why I think, Qualcomm would be happy with this is you're saying that, again, with Office 365, which is native ARM support now, you're not going to feel a difference between Meteor Lake, between Alder Lake, which is similar to Raptor Lake and Raptor Lake Refresh. So, and also, frankly, it's not going to feel that different than a MacBook M Silicon as well. So, if you basically drive Office 365 all day, it's going to feel exactly the same. This is no shock to me. This is actually the way it's been for quite a while. That ARM Silicon's done pretty well if you have optimized code on it, although that SQ3 is looking pretty ugly here. And then, of course, the bottom, this is actually comparing it only to the Windows laptops because you apparently can't run Outlook on the Mac. And, again, you're seeing for Qualcomm, they're saying, hey, we're as fast as Meteor Lake, which is Intel's current best CPU. I know they got Lunar Lake coming, but currently you're looking at basically dead even scores between Meteor Lake and Snapdragon X Elite, with Alder Lake falling back a little bit. But again, honestly, you're not going to really feel those differences unless you're on that SQ3, because that is a significant performance decrease for that older SQ3 chip. Okay, for graphics performance, let's do this. They run 3D Mark. 3D Mark actually has native ARM support. We have Wildlife. We have Solar Bay. And actually, this is brand new. This is Steel Nomad. It's definitely a bit heavier. The overall winner, though, is for very light test for Wildlife Extreme MacBook at about 30% over Snapdragon. It's also about, 30 to 40% over Meteor Lake as well. So good showing for MacBook. And when you're comparing it in Steel Solar Bay, a little bit harsher, but still, again, these are very, very light graphics loads. You're looking at the winner being the MacBook. The Meteor Lake is actually pretty close to the MacBook, but still the winner is the MacBook. And then the Snapdragon X is 22 to 30% slower than the MacBook as well as Intel Meteor Lake. So that's clearly the graphics performance is a bit behind Meteor Lake as well as the M3. When we do Steel Nomad, though, this is a brand new test. It does not actually run on the Mac yet. They are expecting to release it. This is the light version made for thin and light laptops. There's also a version for heavier laptops. But again, Meteor Lake is doing really well with Arc graphics. 35% more performance than Snapdragon X. So definitely Intel Arc well ahead of the Snapdragon X in graphics performance. But that's definitely looks like a bit of a weakness for Snapdragon X versus Meteor Lake as well as versus Apple Silicon. So this is the thing I do care about. We are 30 minutes in. We're going to get close to wrapping this up. This is actually the emulation performance. So for this test, what Signal 65 did is they actually ran, let me zoom in a little bit. They actually ran Blender and Adobe Lightroom Classic. There is actually a version of Blender that is in beta that is native to ARM. Signal 65 did not run that version, so they're basically running this translated using the emulation layer, which Microsoft calls Prism. Microsoft has said they've done a lot of work to improve the emulated or translated performance in Windows, and in fact, it will get even better. But let's look at what we get. First up on the left side, this is Lightroom Classic. Again, this is an application that is not native to ARM, so you are looking at emulated performance, and this is running the Puget benchmark that basically edits a bunch of files in raw mode. It doesn't export. It's quite comprehensive. It's actually been a very, very popular test. I think it's a great test. And here's a shocker, because we are running Lightroom Classic emulated, and the new Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X is basically dead even with an Intel Meteor Lake. So you're looking at 12 cores, which does matter in Lightroom Classic, versus 6 plus 8 in that Meteor Lake. So to me, that is a really, really big win for the Snapdragon X, because I really would have expected the performance when you're running non-native code to be much, much worse. That is not bad at all. So that's quite impressive. Then, of course, we are going to see this in Blender. So Blender is an open source 3D modeling application. It's quite popular. It's getting more popular, and in fact, a lot of people are using it in other things, and things other than just simply small indie projects, because it is free, it is open source, and people like the fact that the price is right. So this is Blender 4.1.1 running the Monster workload. I'm guessing they're using the actual Blender benchmark here. And you're looking at the Snapdragon X not doing quite as well, although it's definitely outperforming the older 12th gen U-class Alder Lake chip, as well as really, really pounding that SQ3 Qualcomm. But up against the Mac Silicon, Mac M3 Silicon has a 17% advantage over that Snapdragon X when it's running emulated, Well, again, Microsoft is promising performance advantage, so we'll see if they can get that up closer to that MacBook because they have more cores. I would have expected them to do better here. And the chip with the most cores is actually the one that wins. Meteor Lake, again, with a 6+8 configuration and plus 2 more low performance efficiency cores, low power efficiency cores, is giving you 46% higher performance than the Snapdragon X in Blender, and also handily beating that MacBook M3 because basically it has more cores. Blender just simply loves cores. So a big win for Meteor Lake here, I would say. But to me, this is quite impressive because in Lightroom Classic, I really would have expected the Snapdragon X Elite to do much, much worse. The fact that they're actually pulling up data even with the Meteor Lake laptop is pretty impressive. And we don't have a performance score for the MacBook because it doesn't run on Mac OS. Okay, so that's it for the look at the performance of Snapdragon X in the Surface laptop. And I will understand if you're skeptical of it because, yes, it is a paid report from Microsoft. They do have a vested interest in making Snapdragon and making the Surface laptop look good. But, it is our best look at what the Snapdragon X performance looks like in a shipping laptop. There's a lot of good info here. All I have to say is you got to wait till these laptops get in the hands of independent reviewers, many independent reviewers, and then wait to see. And then also, you know what? Intel has their new Lunar Lake coming. I imagine AMD has new stuff coming. So it's going to be really, really fun going into the second half of this year as somebody who wants to buy a laptop with a top grade performance CPU. For all we know, Apple might push out a new M4 version as well, because why not? Apple doesn't care about the fact that you just bought your M3. So it's going to be really crazy on the second half of 2024. But if you want that information, come back to PC World's YouTube channel and PCWorld.com.